At my divorce hearing, my husband's mistress stood up in a cream suit, pointed at me in open court, and told the judge I was unstable, obsessive, and dangerous to my own children. My husband sat beside her and nodded like this was all unfortunate but necessary. Then my lawyer pressed one button, and her voice filled the courtroom from a message she never thought anyone else would hear. But I didn't know that by the end of that hearing, the woman who called me crazy would be the one escorted out under an order to stay away from my family. If you like controlled revenge and elegant courtroom payback, stay with me. This one starts with a smear campaign and ends with receipts, timelines, and a judge who was done being lied to. My name is Tessa Monroe. I was 38, a school counselor, and the kind of woman who learned early that composure is not the same thing as weakness. I spent my days helping children name feelings adults were too messy to handle themselves. I knew how panic sounded, how manipulation moved, and how often the calmest person in the room was the one paying closest attention. At work, I documented everything: dates, behavior patterns, parent concerns, interventions, follow-ups. You do that long enough, and you stop trusting dramatic narratives without supporting details. You learn that truth usually lives in sequence. My husband thought that made me predictable. His mistress thought it made me soft. They were both wrong in ways that ended up being very expensive. My husband Derek liked admiration more than peace. He wasn't loud about it. He was polished, charming. The kind of man who remembered birthdays, held doors, and knew exactly how to sound wounded when he was caught doing something selfish. In public, he was the devoted father with a warm smile and a hand always resting lightly on someone's back. At home, things were different. He disappeared into late strategy calls, guarded his phone like it contained state secrets, and turned every concern I raised into proof that I was overreacting. If I asked where he'd been, I was suspicious. If I asked why a card charge looked strange, I was controlling. He had a talent for making reasonable questions sound ugly. Then there was Sloane. I met her twice before I knew who she really was. Once at a charity auction where she laughed too hard at something Derek said. Once outside his office building, where he introduced her as just someone from a client team. She was polished, younger than me, and moved with the confidence of a woman who thought she had already been chosen. The hearing itself was supposed to be procedural: temporary custody, interim support, scheduling, nothing dramatic. That was what my attorney had told me when we walked into family court that rainy Thursday morning. Derek's lawyer had pushed hard for an expedited hearing after filing declarations that painted me as emotionally erratic and unfit for cooperative parenting. I was prepared for dishonesty. I was not prepared for theater. Derek entered with Sloane sitting directly behind him, even though she had no legitimate reason to be there. She wore a pale suit and a sympathetic expression, like she had been cast as the reasonable woman stepping into chaos. My attorney Mara Ellis noticed immediately and wrote one line on her yellow pad: "Let them overperform." Then Derek testified. He sighed before answering questions, glanced down at the table at just the right moments, and said things like, "Tessa has been struggling," and "I'm concerned about the children being exposed to emotional instability." He never raised his voice. That was his trick. He let implication do the damage. Then his attorney asked whether anyone else had observed my episodes. Sloane stood. I felt the blood leave my hands. She took the oath and said, in that clear, polished tone people mistake for honesty, "I've seen Tessa become irrational, paranoid, and aggressive. Frankly, she scares me." The word hung in the room. That's when I realized the affair wasn't just an affair anymore. It was a legal strategy. Derek and I had 2 children, Ava and Miles, 10 and 7. They were the center of everything that mattered. If Derek succeeded in painting me as unstable, I could lose time with them, decision-making authority, and the moral footing mothers are expected to defend twice as hard as fathers. The court didn't need to believe I was dangerous in some dramatic sense. It only needed to doubt me enough to tilt temporary custody his way. And temporary rulings have a way of hardening into narrative. There was also the financial side. Derek wanted the house sold quickly, wanted support minimized, wanted the parenting schedule structured around his convenience and my alleged volatility. He was not just leaving the marriage. He was trying to leave me carrying the damage while he walked into a cleaner story. But I didn't know how sloppy they had been outside court, not yet. 3 days after the hearing notice was filed, I got what I came to think of as the worthless gift: It wasn't jewelry or property. It was reputation damage wrapped as concern. A packet from Derek's attorney arrived with printed screenshots, edited text excerpts, and a summary memo suggesting I was fixated on Sloan. There were references to my late-night messages to Derek, all stripped of context, and one line claiming I had created conflict around his professional associates. In other words, they were trying to turn my instinct that something was wrong into evidence that I was unstable. Derek even said it to my face in the parking lot after mediation. "Nobody believes you," he said. "You sound crazy." Sloan stood beside his car, pretending not to hear, while the corner of her mouth lifted. That was the worthless gift. A public smear so flimsy it relied on tone more than fact. They thought, if they embarrassed me hard enough, I would either break in public or go quiet to preserve dignity. Either response would help them. Instead, I went home, opened a spiral notebook, and wrote one sentence across the first page. Timeline does not care who sounds calmer. The next morning, I began building mine. 5 months later, the hearing that was supposed to be simple had become something else entirely. By then, I had copies of school pickup logs, calendar screenshots, custody exchange messages, pharmacy records, and every hotel charge I could legally connect to Derek's cards through discovery and marital accounting. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was organizing. Derek kept assuming I was reacting to betrayal. What I was actually doing was auditing a lie. My children stayed with me most school nights because even during separation, Derek had trouble making it to homework, dentist forms, and Thursday piano. But in court, he presented himself as the steady one. Sloan helped by feeding the story that I was obsessed with her. Then my phone rang. It was the hotel manager from a boutique property 30 minutes outside the city. I had emailed requesting archived receipts connected to a joint credit card charge that Derek had claimed was a client lodging error. The manager couldn't give me everything directly, but she confirmed that the folio had already been released to counsel in response to subpoena and suggested I ask my attorney to review the attachment list carefully. Mara did, and that's when the entire structure started to buckle. The receipts were worse than I expected and better than I hoped. There were 7 separate hotel stays over 11 months at 2 boutique properties and 1 resort, all charged to cards funded from our marital accounts. Not business hotels, romantic places, spa packages, late checkout fees, dining charges for 2. 1 receipt included a room upgrade tagged with Sloan's initials in the special request line. Another included a furniture delivery confirmation to Derek's rental condo. Not mine, not the marital home. A condo he had sworn was temporary and modest. The purchase included a king bed, a dining set, and 2 bar stools charged under a store account I had never seen disclosed. Joint purchases. A parallel life assembled with marital money. But the best evidence came from a voice message. Months earlier, during one of the nights Derek claimed he was sleeping at the office, Sloan had called my phone by mistake from his number. She must have meant to leave a message for him after he'd stepped away. I saved it because her voice had that easy intimacy you can't mishear. At the time, it was painful. Later, it became useful. On the recording, she laughed and said, "If she shows up tomorrow, I'll just act scared again. You said the crazy wife thing is working." I had listened to it exactly once before giving it to Mara. Now, paired with hotel receipts and a timeline, it was devastating. The timeline showed Derek claiming I was unstable during weeks he was booking rooms with Sloan, buying furniture for the condo, and using marital funds to maintain the relationship. It also showed that Sloan's statements about observing my behavior overlapped with dates she could not have been present unless she was already involved far earlier than they admitted. That's when the case shifted from ugly divorce to coordinated deceit. Then my phone rang again. Mara's voice was so controlled it almost sounded cheerful. "Tessa, bring every custody journal you have. We're not just impeaching credibility anymore, we're asking for protective boundaries." The continued hearing was packed that day. Family court always is. Too many lives trying to be reduced to 15-minute blocks and numbered exhibits. Derek looked confident walking in, but Sloan looked different, less polished, more alert. People get uneasy when lies start acquiring exhibit stickers. Mara began with Derek. "Mr. Monroe, you testified that Miss Monroe fabricated concerns about Miss Sloan, is that correct?" Derek straightened. "Yes." And you testified your relationship with Miss Sloane began after separation? Yes. Mara slid a receipt forward. Then help me understand this hotel folio from 9 months before separation. Derek's face changed by 1 degree. Small, but I saw it. It was a work stay, he said. Mara nodded lightly. With spa charges, couples dining, and her initials on the room request? No answer. Then she called Sloane back to the stand. Sloane crossed one leg over the other and tried to look composed. Mara asked about the day she claimed I had frightened her in a school parking lot. Sloane described it in polished detail. Then Mara placed my school counseling schedule, the campus sign-in sheet, and security camera stills into the record. I had been leading a parent workshop across town that entire hour. Sloane blinked. That's not possible, Mara said. Would you like to amend your testimony? Sloane swallowed. I may have mistaken the date. That's when Mara played the voice message. Sloane's own laugh filled the courtroom. If she shows up tomorrow, I'll just act scared again. You said the crazy wife thing is working. Nobody moved. Derek looked at the table. Sloane went white. Mara spoke into the silence. Is that your voice, Miss Sloane? Sloane whispered, I don't know. I finally looked up. You recognized mine fast enough when you were describing me. That was the only line I gave them, and it was enough. Mara then walked the judge through the hotel receipts, the condo furniture purchases, the overlap with discovery responses, and the pattern of false statements designed to weaken my custody position. She did not rush. She did not grandstand. She built it like a staircase and let them fall down each step. The judge was not amused. He found Derek's credibility severely damaged by the undisclosed affair timeline, misuse of marital funds, and inconsistent testimony. He found Sloane's testimony unreliable and strategically colored, which is one of the coldest insults I have ever heard from a bench. Then he addressed the part that mattered most to me, the smear campaign. The judge noted the attempt to portray me as unstable appeared tied to custody advantage rather than documented concern. My counseling records, school employment file, children's attendance records, and parenting journal showed consistency, not chaos. Derek's side had offered accusation. We had offered sequence. Temporary custody swung hard in my favor. I got primary residential time, expanded decision-making authority, and stricter communication rules limiting Derek's ability to use third parties to interfere. Financially, the settlement posture shifted too. Marital funds used on the affair and condo purchases were counted back into the estate analysis. Support was recalculated. Derek lost leverage all at once. And then came the final turn. Because after the hearing, Sloane did not take the loss gracefully. She sent me 2 hostile messages from an unknown number, then appeared outside Ava's dance studio the following week. She never approached my daughter, but she stood there long enough for the instructor to call me and for security cameras to preserve the whole thing. That was enough. Mara filed immediately, and the court granted a restraining order prohibiting Sloane from contact with me and the children and from appearing at school or activity locations. The woman who had tried to label me dangerous ended up under a court order to stay away from my family. But I didn't know how satisfying that would feel until I heard the clerk read it into the record. Not loud, not theatrical, just official. A year later, the house was quieter in the best way. Ava did her homework at the kitchen table. Miles left Lego pieces in impossible places. I still worked at the school, still listened more than I spoke, still kept notes when something felt off. The difference was that now my home belonged to the truth again. Derek sees the kids on schedule. He arrives on time more often than he used to, which I suspect has less to do with growth and more to do with the fact that court orders make some men discover discipline. Sloane disappeared from the edges of our life entirely. No more messages, no more staged concern, no more cream suits in court trying to look innocent. People sometimes ask whether revenge was the point. No, control was. Not control over Derek, not over Sloane, over my own narrative, over what my children would someday be able to look back on and verify. I did not need to scream to win. I needed the sequence, the receipts, and enough patience to let the lie get comfortable before I pulled the chair out from under it. Moral: when someone calls you crazy, ask what truth they need to discredit to make that label work. Smear campaigns collapse when evidence starts keeping time. And the calmest revenge is often just the truth, documented properly. in front of the right judge. Tell me in the comments, when did you know Sloane's act was falling apart? And subscribe for more family drama stories where betrayal meets controlled justice.